What is up, you guys? Today we are going to be talking all about the pelvic floor, what the heck it is, what it does, how it works, how to look for possible dysfunctions, and how to take care of it. So let's go. What the heck is the pelvic floor? It's actually a group of muscles that kind of create a hammock inside your pelvis. And yes, everybody has a pelvic floor. So there are actually 5 really important functions to the pelvic floor. They don't just hold our organs inside of our body. The first thing that your pelvic floor does is it gives your body support. So if those muscles weren't there, your organs would just fall right out of your body. The second function of the pelvic floor is the sphincter aspect. So for women, we have 3 sphincters within this group of muscles, and for men, we have 2. So it's the urethra, goes through one sphincter, and that's where our pee comes out of, the vaginal canal, and the rectum as well. To put it nicely, the purpose of these sphincters is really to make sure that we aren't going to the bathroom when we don't need to, and that we can go to the bathroom when we do need to. The third function of the pelvic floor is going to be your sexual function. So it is responsible for creating the tone of the vaginal canal, helps us push out babies, helps during sex. The fourth function of the pelvic floor is going to be stability. So because of where these muscles are attached inside your pelvic floor, it's attached to your tailbone, your pubic bone, and your hip bones. So if these muscles aren't working properly, a lot of people tend to find a lot of low back pain, pelvic pain, hip pain. And the fifth function is your sump pump function. So that means that the pelvic floor can help remove waste, remove swelling from the area, or bring blood into the area. So at this point in the video, I've probably already mentioned things that maybe you're like, hey, I struggle with that. Maybe it's my pelvic floor. And we're going to dive into that a little bit closer. So there are kind of 2 main categories of dysfunction when it comes to the pelvic floor. You can be hypertonic or hypotonic. So hypertonic is when the muscles are really, really tight. They're hanging on, they're clenching all day long. It's like you're just squeezing your biceps like this all day. And it becomes really, really tight, really painful, really tender. And because it is so tight, it actually becomes weak as well. With hypotonic, there is this myth that these muscles can become loose. And we hear this a lot after childbirth, and this is not the case. These muscles are not loose, they are just weak, and they cannot get a full contraction like you normally would. In this video, we are going to be talking all about how to take care of your pelvic floor and how to improve dysfunction. However, I do still recommend that you go seek out a pelvic floor physical therapist or someone who is specialized in this area of health. So remember when I talked about the pelvic floor being heavily involved in stability, support, sexual function, sphincter function, and that sub pump? If your pelvic floor is hypertonic, you are going to struggle with these, and if it's hypotonic, you are also going to struggle with these, but the symptoms are going to look a lot different. When it comes to the support of these muscles, if they are very, very hypertonic, they're going to be sitting up really nice and high, and they're going to be holding on for dear life to keep these organs in your body. And what that's going to do is it's going to make those muscles very, very tender and sore. On the other hand, if those muscles are hypotonic, they're going to be sitting a lot lower. They're going to be really struggling to hold those organs in place. And some people actually get prolapse. And mind you, there are different grades of prolapse, but that means these organs are actually starting to fall and they're not sitting properly in place. So if you're struggling with a really heavy feeling in your pelvic floor or in your pelvis in general, I highly recommend that you go see a professional about that. So function number 2, stability. If these muscles are really, really tight all day, people are going to start experiencing back pain, pubic pain, hip pain. On the other hand, if those muscles are hypotonic, it's going to make it really, really difficult to properly support your pubic bone, your tailbone, and your hip bones. Remember when I talked about the pelvic floor being in a lot of pain when it is hypertonic? Again, remember this example. It's as if you're doing a million bicep curls all day long. Eventually, you are going to be really sore to the touch. And that can impact our next function, which is sexual function. So when those muscles are hypertonic and they're on all day long, those muscles can get really, really sore and tender to the touch, which actually makes sexual intercourse really, really painful for a lot of people. So the final dysfunction that we are going to be talking about is when it comes to these sphincters of the pelvic floor. So we have these little sphincters that open and close as the pelvic floor relaxes and contracts. So when it comes to these sphincters, if your muscle is hypertonic and those muscles are really, really tight, they are still going to be weak, and it's going to make it really hard to control those sphincters. And on the other hand, we have hypotonic, and that is also weak and also makes it really hard to control those sphincters. So again, when it comes to the pelvic floor being hypertonic or hypotonic, you could be struggling with leaking throughout the day or the inability to go to the bathroom. So there are so many reasons why someone could be having dysfunction in the pelvic floor. Big one is going to be pregnancy, but smoking can be another one. Improper breathing, improper posture, hernias, going to the bathroom too often. So if you're that type of person who's going to go to the bathroom just in case before you leave the house, that can add to dysfunction. If you are someone who's holding it on all the time, that can lead to dysfunction as well. You're just squeezing all the time, trying to prevent yourself from going to the bathroom. Anything that is going to put pressure on this pelvic floor and not letting it work the way it's supposed to. So we have all of this pressure in our belly, which is represented by this ball, okay? And holding in that pressure, you have your diaphragm here and your pelvic floor down here. So your diaphragm is kind of this dome-shaped muscle here. And when you breathe in, your lungs need room to expand. And so this diaphragm moves down and kind of flattens out like this. So then you have all this pressure here that's kind of squished because this muscle is moving. So your pelvic floor or your hammock kind of relaxes to make room for all that extra pressure. Here's what happens though. For a lot of people, when their diaphragm moves down, where is that pressure going to go? A lot of people comes out of their belly. Some of it will come down, but a lot of people really struggle with that pressure coming outwards if their pelvic floor is stuck like this, right? So then you're pushing, where is all that air or that pressure supposed to go? It's going to come out of your belly. That's where we start to see things like hernias or separation of the abs, okay? So that's why it's really important that as the diaphragm moves down, your pelvic floor accommodates, and it's constantly moving like this. That leads me to the first exercise we're going to learn is how to actually properly breathe. So if you remember when I talked about how posture was really closely related to the pelvic floor, if you have really poor posture, then that's something that we want to fix or improve upon to improve that pressure in the belly, make sure that it's moving down properly into the pelvic floor. So I want you to find a mirror and look for these things. So I want you to roll the shoulders back, stand up nice and tall, make sure that your ear, your shoulder, your hip, and your ankle are all lined up. Constantly like this all day, or if we are constantly on our phones, then that pressure is going to be moving down and back instead of down into the pelvic floor. I do want to reiterate, this is not a perfect scenario, okay? I understand people are going to be hunched over. We're going to be sitting in weird positions. That is okay, as long as we are very aware that we're not doing it all the time. Next, I want you to get really comfortable in finding your pelvic floor and what to feel for. So I want you to either find a chair that you can sit on the corner of, or a big, like one of these guys, but a big exercise ball. That will be helpful as well. So you're going to sit on it, and all you're going to do is you're going to rock your hips forward and backwards until you can feel for where that pelvic floor is and your tailbone. So just from the side, again, rocking back to feel the tailbone, and then rocking forward to feel the pubic bone. Once you've found those two spots, I want you rocking side to side. This one's typically easy for people. Just feel where those bony parts of your bum are. And those are going to be your sits bones. So I want you to imagine those 4 points. Those are the points that we want to be bringing together when we contract the muscles and letting those muscles relax. We're going to be pushing those 4 points apart. The second thing I want you to learn and understand is going to be diaphragmatic breathing. So all this means is that you are breathing with very good posture, and you're breathing that pressure in your belly, right, so that it's properly moving downwards instead of outwards. So to learn diaphragmatic breathing, all I want you to do is place your fingers on your rib cage like this. You're going to feel your index fingers at the front of your rib cage, and your thumbs are going to be on the back of your rib cage. And all I want you to do is breathe in, feel that rib cage expand, and then feel that rib cage relax. And you should be getting this perfectly round or oval expansion of the rib cage. If you feel that it's expanding only in the front, you might kind of be breathing into your chest like this. Some people are going to be breathing more into their back, right? And they're only going to feel their rib cage move under their thumbs. So I want you to practice this over and over and over again until you feel that perfect 360. That way you know that your rib cage is expanding properly. So at this point, once you are really comfortable with diaphragmatic breathing, the second step that I want you to take is practicing it in different positions. So right now we're practicing it sitting, but we don't sit all day, right? The next thing that I want you practicing when it comes to diaphragmatic breathing is being able to incorporate your pelvic floor muscles. So naturally, those muscles should be working as is. The more that you practice it, the better those muscles are going to respond to it. But for the sake of today, I do want you to be able to feel those muscles working. When you are inhaling, you are going to be holding your rib cage. You're going to inhale, and on the inhale, you're going to think of those 4 points: the 2 hip bones, the tailbone, and the pubic bone, and think of them moving away from each other. So you're going to inhale, move those 4 points away, and then on the exhale, you're going to feel those 4 points pull back together. Okay, so I want you to focus on those 4 points, moving them away, letting them come back together. I do want to note that these are not forced movements, okay? We want to let the body and those muscles do it naturally on their own. The more that you practice this, the more that it's going to become an innate movement and an innate breathing pattern that you're going to do all the time without even thinking about it. I tend to notice with a lot of my clients, just incorporating this breathing pattern improves their symptoms dramatically. However, if you've already been trying diaphragmatic breathing, you're not noticing any results, then this next part of the video is going to be really helpful for you. So before we talked about how this pressure from the diaphragm moves down and should move into the pelvic floor, and you should kind of have this rhythmic movement. A big piece of that is going to be the core, because it's at the front of this pressure, okay? So typically we don't get a lot of movement in the spine itself that's going to impact this. So if your pelvic floor is not working properly and you have this diaphragm pushing down this way, all this pressure is going to move out of your abdomen. What this means is if we are not controlling that pressure properly, so if we are not controlling the abdomen properly or those core muscles, that pressure is naturally going to move forward, and the pelvic floor has no reason to relax and contract like it's supposed to. Typically what we see is a lot of people have a hard time with those deep core muscles if they are not being able to contract them properly or don't have good control over them. Again, that pressure is going to move out into the belly, and the pelvic floor is going to remain really tight and weak, or just on the weak side. A technique that I like to give a lot of my clients is blowing out birthday candles.
So I want you to watch in this clip how here I breathe out, I blow out my birthday candles, and you can see my deep core muscles contract. And then I go into the toe taps or the bird dog on these. Then you can see once I let go and I try to tap both feet on the ground, I'm not actually controlling my TVA at all. And you can actually see my back arch up off the floor. And this is something you want to really avoid with all of your exercises. You can also see here I'm reducing the impact of the exercise, but I'm still not controlling my TVA. And you can see all that pressure that was moving up into my belly. So again, blow out those birthday candles and then try different variations of core exercises before you move on to something a little bit more advanced.
So that wraps up our video. You learned what the pelvic floor is, what it does, what kind of dysfunctions to look for, and how to take care of it. If you have any questions, make sure to leave them in the comments below, like and subscribe to this video. Bye guys.